Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Building World Peace, an interview series showcasing modern business school initiates from all walks of life who are working for the same mission of building world peace. I am your host, Ling, and I am a teacher, a guide, and a ritual master in this ancient lineage of King Solomon under the modern business school. And I'm super excited to introduce you to a fellow initiate today that we usually don't get to see on camera as much. Flav Gracile. Hi, Flav.
Hello, everybody. Good to be here.
And we definitely will go into his story a little bit, and also he'll have some time to introduce himself. But first, I want to ask Flav, through his words, to explain to you what the modern mystery school is, and also, Flav, what does it mean to you?
Well, to me, the modern mystery school I've always described it like a hardware store. It's a place where you go to buy tools. And of course, what you do with those tools is then up to you. But what it really amounts to is a place you go to learn the tools to build the best possible life for yourself.
Wow, I've never heard that before. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. I think I want to use this. I want to use this now to explain it to people. Yeah, so Flav, could you introduce yourself a little?
So, everybody, my name is Flav, short for Flavio. I am also a guide, a healer, and a ritual master with the Modern Mystery School. And I've been with the school for, what are we, in 2021, about 7 years now, 6, 7 years now. And it's been quite a ride for sure. And the ride only seems to be getting more exciting. Things keep happening. Like those tools that I got at the hardware store, so to speak. I seem to keep building this bigger and better, exciting life, and it's just no end in sight. So yeah.
Awesome. Um, Flav, what's your story? What brought you here to this point today?
Okay, so get ready for this one. I first heard about the mystery school. I was sitting in a strip club when I first heard about the school. Now, it's not what you might think. But at the time, I was very deeply involved with like conspiracy theories and basically what is today woke culture. It was a little different, some years ago. And of course, that kind of thing brushed up on new age spirituality and so forth. So I'm sitting in the strip club one day, and a friend of mine messages me completely at random and says, "Hey, Flav, I know you're into consciousness and metaphysics and all of this. I have a friend who's involved in a mystery school." And at the time, my very first reaction was, wow, there's a mystery school in Toronto. That's where I'm from, Toronto, Canada. I had read at the time about like the schools of ancient mystery, but I had always assumed that they would be, somewhere very much detached from civilization, like in the mountains of Nepal or something like that. And to learn that there was one right there in an urban center was quite shocking. So this friend asked if she could put me in touch with her friend, and I said absolutely. And her and I got together one day, and she outlined for me the path. But really, what I wanted to know about, I mean, I didn't realize it at the time. She kind of picked up on it and told me about it. What I really wanted to know about was the ritual master path. And she couldn't really get into all the details with me. She had just met me, but she was able to basically get across to me that this is a path where you're going to meet some very like-minded people who recognize there's a problem in the world and who want to make the world better and who want to actively contribute to making the world better. And along the way, you're going to receive a whole bunch of teachings, a whole bunch of tools, and a whole bunch of perspective on what that problem is and how to really, really address it and how to really make a real difference. So she outlined for me the steps, like getting life activated and then doing Empower Thyself and then going to Healers Academy and basically doing all of these steps. And so I started doing them one at a time, one at a time. And I had a lot of attachments, a lot of expectations, of course. But what I ended up doing was allowing each step to dictate what my next direction would be. So I did not start the first step thinking I knew what the 10th step would look like. I just took the first step to see what the second step would look like, to then allow to see what the third step and the fourth step, and to just allow, literally taking it one step at a time. And each time allowing myself to readjust my expectations, and just kind of let the energy flow and let this path guide me to where, I really wanted to be, that was always inside of me. I just didn't know it at the time, if that makes sense. So really was about allowing what I am already to come out, and just kind of clearing away all the clutter. So yeah, not sure if that really made any sense, but hopefully it did.
Wow. I usually intentionally don't ask the guests about their story in advance because I want to be surprised. And you definitely surprised me. I would never have thought, you were into conspiracies. I never have thought, you were woke. That was a term that you used.
I mean, it was different back then,
And
but
in a strip club, right?
yeah.
Interesting.
No one ever expects that one.
What can you explain? Maybe give a, I don't know, brief or long, depending. What do you mean the work culture was different back then? I'm curious to see how it
Well,
has changed. Yeah.
so I mean, one thing I think the world today is very familiar with is this concept of mutations. So like, coronavirus showed up, and now we know what the concept of mutation is because the virus mutated, and everybody knows what that looks like. Once upon a time, there was this conspiracy culture, and today's woke culture is kind of like a mutation of that. It's like a derivative of that. So, way back when, I was, kind of in this headspace that believed in, things like the hidden hand behind world events, and, the Illuminati and all the rest of that stuff. And today's woke culture is kind of derived from that. So it does look a little, the landscape of it, I think, is different than what I was, researching and getting myself involved in. One thing that I do think is common with it, though, at that time as is today, is that it is full of people who are genuinely seeking to do something good in the world. And I think that's the common thread. And I think that's the unifying thread. And speaking from myself and the people that I associated with, the thing that I think is problematic is that people don't really know what are the steps to take that are going to result in a genuine change, because the guidance is not there. It's like people rely on social media and what they're learning and hearing on, and there's interviews with scientists and various experts that are giving all kinds of information. But to put it like this, we're going through a world with oceans of information, yet barely a drop of wisdom. And without that wisdom, all that information, it just kind of jumbles together, and we can't really see where it goes and how it integrates. And that can help to provide a roadmap to world peace. And I think that's what's missing in the world. So for me, I had all this passion and all this desire and a lot of knowledge. Some of it was real and good and true, and some of it wasn't. But what was lacking was the wisdom, because that wisdom is what allowed for that integration. And I think that really is what's missing.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is like the second or third interview where knowledge versus wisdom conversation comes up. And it's always like that, right? Like you can go to any kind of schools, you can go to the internet and you have access to almost infinite knowledge.
Really
But then
is.
to turn that into wisdom, it requires, application, it requires learning, it requires humility and so much more that
Absolutely.
you can't just read a book about. Um, yeah, and I think for me, that's what I appreciate the most about this path is that if you want to continue progressing, you have to be willing to put yourself out there and test things out. Maybe
100%.
be kicking your ass a little bit.
100%. I remember when we were at
Yeah.
the Minnesota program a couple months ago. Um, I had actually said to an initiate who was having trouble kind of figuring this out. I said to them, "What's the best way to learn how to skydive? Read about it." And of course, I was saying that, sarcastically, because that's obviously not the best way to learn how to skydive. You want to skydive, you have to actually skydive. You have to experience that adrenaline and that experience. You won't have that experience just by reading about it. And I think that right there is where the difference between knowledge and wisdom comes in, because the knowledge is contained in a book, but the wisdom is the experience and everything that goes along with it, including, in the case of skydiving, that adrenaline, that rush that you get, and then trying to keep that along with all of the knowledge is where the tricky part lies, and that's where you really learn your individual application. So yeah, that's what I find about the mystery school. It really, it teaches, but then it really pushes and encourages going out and having your own wisdom and finding out, what do these teachings mean in my life, because they're not going to be the same as in your life or anyone else's.
Right, and from that you uh, become the evidence for something
Exactly.
that does work or does not work. Yeah, I love that this topic keeps coming up. I mean, it's probably because it's very important in today's, you know, landscape, like what you were saying, where and something that you brought up was how the work culture or conspiracy or whatever side, right? Because right now I feel like the work culture and the conspiracy theories are in a way actually two different, presented as two different sides. But if you look beyond that division, it's really is only they're only people who care, people who
Hmm.
want to do better,
Hmm.
who want to make the world a better place, and maybe their efforts are misguided, but the intentions are there.
That's really important. It's important that they just don't that they don't have this attitude, well, I don't care, it doesn't affect me, why should I care? They do care, and that, I think, is really where it starts.
What I would say, I would say I'm like a later stage. I was into later stage work culture,
Hmm.
so I don't have like that vision of the previous one.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I'm coming from a liberal arts college where it's being angry was and still is kind of like the only way that people know how to act from, and in a way it's becoming more and more accepted. So being able to see through that and bringing compassion in, like the way you did, that's really refreshing.
100%. 100%.
And well, with compassion, the topic that comes up is world peace, because that's also the topic of our interview today. And so I want to ask you, Flav, because everyone's going to have their own vision of what world peace looks like. What does world peace look like to you?
Well, I think that to really kind of appreciate that question, people need to understand what world war looks like. World war is when people cannot seem to agree or allow others to just live their own lives. So the opposite would therefore be world peace, where people are allowed to, live their own lives, live in a fulfilled way, um, provide for themselves, provide for their families, not have to struggle to get by, and be able to cooperate. I think that's a big one right there. I think when people are kind of clawing each other and pulling each other down, and it's like my gain is your loss, that's where we have like the problems that we have in the world. World peace to me recognizes that everybody needs to do well, and that everybody needs to kind of do well, but also balance, do well for themselves, and that if I'm successful, I am allowed to enjoy the fruit of that success without, someone else trying to take it from me, someone else trying to tear me down, someone else trying to compete with me, but rather someone else coming along and saying, hey, how can I be like you? How can I work with you? How can you and I get together and make something even greater? And people having this mindset of building something bigger and greater for themselves as well as for the general collective, as well as sorry, as opposed to trying to tear things down because they don't feel fulfilled. So I think world peace really breaks down to everybody in the world recognizing that they are capable of peace within themselves as well as in the world, and then starting to look at how can I make that possibility real for myself and in contribution to the collective.
Wow, that's yeah, I was kind of deep in that visualization. I was like, oh, I want that too. Um, so if you're working for world peace, you must have to believe. You must believe that it is possible.
Yeah.
Did you have a moment when you first believed, or when you first realized that all the things that you were talking about, that it was actually possible?
I mean, yes, I'd say that it was a moment, but it was probably more like a string of moments. And I suppose you could call it a sense of wisdom. When I first started with the conspiracy stuff, I mean, at the end of the day, all the conspiracy, all the woke people, they do what they do because they recognize that it is possible. On some level, they recognize that it is possible to have something better. And that is why they're out there doing the things that they do, because they feel what they're doing will result in that. To me, I realized that the majority of people that I had encountered in my life were good people. They wanted something good. If left to their own devices, in terms of if they were not tempted by taking from others, if they were, given opportunity to be successful, if they were, taken care of, if their families were taken care of, I do believe that every single one of them, if given the choice, would do good in the world. And this to me extended to the whole world. And I felt, I don't know that there's anybody on the planet that would do different. If everybody could eat, if everybody could take care of themselves, if everybody could be sheltered and their families were taken care of, and all of this, and then you provided them the opportunity to do something bad, I don't think that they would be motivated to do anything bad. And this realization kind of made me come, basically made me come and realize that yes, world peace is possible if we can just achieve that state where everybody feels that they are able to take care of themselves, to take care of others, to take care of their families, and they don't feel forced, if you will, to, hurt others. Because, thinking strictly matrix, all crime is a consequence of economics, right? That's been studied every which way. If everybody was economically okay, it's statistically that crime is lower. So I think that's really what it breaks down to. And so yes, very winded, long-winded answer that yes, I do believe world peace is possible, and I do think that everybody on the planet can have it. It's just goes back to that idea of guidance and wisdom.
Wow. So for context, for the viewers, listeners, Flav is so as ritual masters on the warrior's path. We have our yearly, or maybe yeah, yearly training called Words of Light, where we come and learn, to get stronger physically, mentally, and maybe emotionally. I haven't really been, but and Flav is one of the teacher, I guess instructor for the
Yes,
program.
Words of Light instructors, yes.
And I think one of the things that has struck me since the very beginning of meeting you is that you're like this buff and big guy who like yell, he depending because you're training a warrior, so you kind of can be like army style, and this is just my impression.
I can assure
But
you,
then
Lynn, I can assure you there's a number of initiates that have the same exact impression.
yes,
I
right.
recognize
So like,
fully, I recognize fully that I am not the type of person you would expect to be interested in this type of thing.
and that's cool because what happened is, even though you're all like that, like macho, matrix term, but when you like when I talk to you, or just I mean, I'm sure anyone who's been listening, like I'm so amazed at how much compassion and how much kindness you have for yourself, but also for everyone else. And it's, to me, it's such a great example of being balanced between um, I mean, strength, like between I guess strength and compassion, right? Which in the study of Kabbalah, we know that we need to achieve that balance.
Absolutely.
Um, wow, in your version, with your vision of world peace, um, with that belief, or maybe not even belief, maybe knowing that everyone is capable of choosing good. Um, how have you been, or how are you? How have you been contributing or contributing to that mission?
Yeah.
What has been your expression?
Well, very much what you described. Um, One thing that I don't think is a secret is that when you get involved with the mystery school, you tend to see that there's a certain profile of initiate, in terms that there are certain people in the world that tend to be attracted to these teachings, this type of thing. And to that end, there does seem to be more women initiates than men, and there's not very many men who kind of match my profile. You know, guys with beards and that are big, strong. I think that is changing, but still, it is kind of in its infancy. And from the very beginning, my interest with the mystery school was to demonstrate to the strong men of the world, um, especially those that are involved in certain professions. So, military, law enforcement, men and women, by the way, who are out there in a professional setting trying to make the world a better place. They're not just out there, protesting on the street, but they actually are the police officers, the firefighters, the paramedics who are dealing with the world's ugliness on a day-to-day basis. And to let them know that there is these teachings that can give them that additional layer of wisdom that they themselves can bring to their professional work as police officers, as firefighters, and all the rest of that. And that not only can they bring that to their work, but they can bring that to their lives. And I think that spirituality is a real thing. Those that either if people believe it or not, it's still a real thing, and it's real for everybody. And I think that people like myself, big strong guys, they tend to dismiss it a little bit. And I think that that's because guys like me and girls like me, they tend to think that there's nothing in this for them. They think that it's all hairy fairy, whatever, that doesn't apply to me because I'm a grounded individual, I believe in reality, and so forth. But they don't see that there is a connection between the two. So, to put it another way, when we look at all of the warrior cultures from past and present, there is a very, very strong spiritual component to all of their teachings. So, we look at the traditions of the Norse warriors, the Vikings, the Thor and the Odin and the Valkyries and Freya and Balder, all of these gods that were known in mythology to be vicious warriors, but were strongly, strongly spiritual. Same thing with the Spartan traditions. King Leonidas and his Spartan 300, they were very deeply spiritual people. The spirituality was deeply ingrained. And then we look at the samurai of Japan, feudal Japan. You look at the Templar Knights of medieval Europe. These are all warrior clans and warrior classes throughout history that had very deeply profound spiritual teachings that were lost over time. And now today, the warriors of today have certain spiritual kind of beliefs in their traditions, but not in a structured way. And I think that that is missing, and that is necessary for them to really kind of, bring that warrior archetype into the modern world in a meaningful way. So my goal has always been from the beginning to really ignite the spirituality in the warriors of modern society.
That's so cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, please. More of that. Ever since I was little, I was always amazed at all these stories about warriors of the past that are able to stand up against their enemies or evils that seem so much bigger than them. And it was until after maybe after a couple of years, probably I had to have gotten on the spiritual master path, where I realized, oh, that's how they could do it, right? They had to have that connection to spirit, to something so much bigger than them. Because
Hmm.
otherwise, if you just keep that realistic or grounded viewpoint of being human, I mean, being human is limited. It's small. If you just have that viewpoint, it's really hard to fight for something, to believe in something bigger, and also to actually fight for it. So yeah, I'm happy, and I hope to see more, more of those big, strong warrior men being able um, to, I would say, go even beyond what the physical, like I guess the physical challenges that they have been able to master.
Well, I mean, even when we look at, in modern society, we have so much reverence for the people that have been able to achieve that. So, you look at the Mark Zuckerbergs, you look at the Bill Gateses, you look at the Steve Jobs. These are men with immeasurable success that are almost archetypes in modern society. It's like this is the archetype of the modern successful entrepreneur that started some crappy little business in their garage and today are among the richest men on the planet. And it's like, well, how did they do that? And not to say necessarily that they did it, through spiritual understanding, but they did confront something that was what everyone around them, their parents, their peers, their friends, everybody said to them, "You're insane. This is never going to work. This will never go anywhere." And they faced failure so many times, but kept trying and trying. And today, it's like they're the model for the world. We all want to be the Mark Zuckerbergs, but they really had to confront that failure and that that impossible. And I think that is really important, and that's what the modern warriors and also the warriors of past. Um, to put it another way, I wrote an article for the Mystery School a couple of months ago, and it was about the Warrior's Way. It's available on the Modern Mystery School, link on their website, on the international website. And in it, I said a warrior is someone who does things too difficult for most people, for common people, and that really involves taking on something that is beyond the parameters of you know realistic society. So pretty cool, I think.
What did you use? Yeah, that's cool. A lot of like new kind of, I would say, for me personally, again coming from liberal arts college, there were a lot of new perspectives that I'm taking in.
Mm.
I'm gonna rewatch this. What did you used to do before you joined the music school? I think you were an athlete, but I don't know if there's
Yeah.
more to that.
So I mean, I've been into athletics basically my whole life. I started getting into bodybuilding, a number of years ago. Pretty much grew up being groomed, if you will, to take over the family business, which is an accounting business, an accounting firm. Um, Fast forward a number of
I
years,
cannot imagine you as an accountant. I
I
can't.
cannot tell you how many times I've heard that in my life. And just to kind of go back for a second, that really is one of the things that the mystery school helped me with, is to kind of clear away all of the stuff that society tells you need to do with your life that stops the real you from expressing itself. But another story. So anyway, um, right around the time that I discovered the mystery school, I had really taken some new steps with my athleticism, and it's literally like this weaving was taking place, and I really didn't realize what was happening at the time. But basically, around the time I did Empower Thyself, I had discovered a number of training facilities in the United States that were run by retired Navy SEALs, and I had started to travel to the States to participate in these training camps. Then they were basically taking people in. So I did my first one, and then a few months later, I did Empower Thyself. And then I did another one. And then a few weeks later, I did Healers Academy. And while this weaving was taking place, I started to open a business in Toronto, open a gym. And that gym opened just a few weeks before I became a ritual master. I was in Brazil a couple of years ago when I met this wonderfully lovely ritual master with the mystery school as well. Um, she is today my fiance. And, it's funny how that happened as well because, we were having a love spell, a Wiccan love spell that evening. And, Christmas Dave comes to me and he goes to me, "Yeah, Flav, you're finally going to get a night off." And I said, "Well, not really, because one of the high priestesses who was running the love spell had asked me to come and represent the male energy. So I said I would. And I said, well, not really,
You
I'm going to go
mean
and
the love spell? The love spell was a class, right? Just to
yeah,
clarify
it
for the
was
viewers.
more like a group kind of, ceremony. You know what I mean? I was asked to come and represent the male energy, so I did. And Subsistence Dave said, "Well, you're gonna get a night off." I said, "Well, not really, and I'm gonna come down and do it." And he goes, "Well, I think that'd be good for you, bro. I think you need some of that energy in your life." And I interrupted him and I said, "Subsistence Dave, I have a very nice 10,000 square foot wife. Thank you very much." And of course, I was referring to my business because at the time I was very attached to my business. I was working way more than a healthy person should. Um, Working on Christmas, working on Thanksgiving, working on Easter, New Year's, just working way, 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 way too much. And he said to me, "Yeah, but bro, that's not healthy. You need to take a step back from that. No successful man became successful without a successful woman behind him." And there's a very deep and profound teaching there. And I think that in the context of world peace, that is a big piece of achieving that I can do it that I spoke about earlier. And that is the healing of the dynamic between men and women. And that men and women fundamentally to create new life have to come together. There's that mixing of energy. But to create anything requires male and female balance. And that healing has to come together and happen for us to have that that world peace. So you know wasn't so much at the love spell, but it was a few days later that me and this ritual master kind of met, and one thing had led to another kind of thing. And like I said, today she's my fiance. And that represented a huge amount of healing for me, and I think for her as well. And now we are poised to create something magical that neither of us could have done on our own. And I know that none of this really talks about my background before the mystery school, which was your question, but yeah, sorry about that tangent.
That's cool. I love all the stories where the men are like, "No, I'm married to my business," and then something happened, and oops, never mind. Well, Flav, it is time. Yeah, I can ask so many questions, but it is time.
Okay.
Almost the end of the interview. Thank you for all the stories that you've shared. I'm sure there's a lot of good bits for anyone, but especially for men out there who are looking for, um, either a role model or maybe a different way of life, right? Because um, yeah, it's man or woman, we all have the potential and capacity to be so much more than we are. And I think also like the capacity to be joyful, to be living in joy, which is um, perhaps not something that men are introduced to often. So I want to ask you, Flav, what's the wisdom that you have for, let's be specific, for the men who are watching this, who um, who may be questioning their life decisions or their life's work and maybe looking for something different.
Well, the best advice I've always received in the mystery school has always been, are you joyful? Is what you're considering doing going to bring you joy? And first of all, it's very important to remember that joy and happiness are not the same thing. And I think that that's something that people need to really kind of define for themselves. Once they've gotten that definition, just do what brings you joy. Literally, just do that. And it makes all your decision making very, very easy. And you will achieve success from that because if you are joyful, joy will fuel whatever you're doing into success. And and it might seem that the world is not going to let that happen because it's unrealistic. Um, but that's where the magic is. Magic is really fueled by joy. So whatever you're doing, whatever business you're in, whatever activity you're involved with, if it's fueled by joy, magic will flow into it and make it into a success, and it will become the next Amazon, the next Facebook, the next Microsoft, whatever. So that would be my advice, not only to men but to women in general. Be joyful in everything you do. And also,
Great,
sorry, on
thank
that
you.
note, I will just mention um, I'm flowing some of my joy into a brand of t-shirts that I've got going on. Warriors Calling, maybe you guys can see it a little bit. But basically, it's a bunch of t-shirts for athleticism, for the athletes of the world, and they reflect the teachings of our lineage as well as the warrior traditions. So check it out, warriorscalling.com. And as you guys can see, Lynn's got hers, Goddesses Calling, for the lovely goddesses of the world. So check it out and enjoy.
Cool. Thank you, Flav. So the Warriors Calling, that's your brand, and is that
Yep.
also the website, right? Warriorscalling.com.
Warriorscalling.com. Yep.
Okay, cool. And
Warriorscalling.com.
and for anyone who may be interested in working with you, healing or empowerment capacity, how can they reach you?
Best way would be by email. So the easiest way to get in touch with me is flavio.gracile@gmail.com. So that would be FLAVIO.GRACILE
It's awesome, and it's gonna be on the video and also gonna be in the description too, for anyone who may want to get in touch with you, and the
Great.
Warriors Calling website too.
Looking
Thank you so
forward
much,
to it.
Flav.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
having
you
me,
so
Lynn. It was a
much.
pleasure.
It was a pleasure here too. Well, have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you
Great.
very soon.
Thank you. See you soon, Lynn. Take care. Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao,
Bye, Flav,
everybody.
and bye, everyone.
Bye.